Welcome, everybody, to our Tactical Tuesday this week. We are excited to have you. So say hi as you come on. Let us know where you're from. We have a great topic today, and that is about this document we're going to talk about right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's what we call a letter of intent, which is a really valuable document for us as real estate investors. It was, I would say, single-handedly the one document that helped Tiffany and I to raise millions of dollars when we were doing our major capital raising back in the early 2000s. And it works today. Many of our Ignited members are using it as well. And we're going to talk about why it's helpful. We're going to actually go through the document today, step by step, to fill it out and show you why we use this, why there are certain questions on here that we need to answer, and what the purpose of them are. So hopefully it becomes something you become familiar with and you use over and over and over again, and it makes capital raising super, super easy. That's what we want, right? Hello, everybody from Whitby, Panorama, Guelph, Vancouver, Thornhill, Edmonton, Ottawa, all over Canada. Welcome to our Tactical Tuesday this week. Yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to share the screen here and fill this document out together. And as we do it, guys, if you have any questions or something doesn't make sense, or why is that? Why do you fill that out? Why do you have that on there? What's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of that? Just feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll try to answer those questions as we go through it. Good. So here we go, guys. Let's get started. And before we just bring the document up, there's a few points that I want to clarify when it comes to our letter of intent. Now, you see it's a 3-page document, and there's maybe, 10 questions on here that we end up filling out. And then at the very back page, a spot where you end up signing with your potential partner. And just remember, when it comes to this document, it's different than a joint venture agreement. That is a legal document, whereas a letter of intent is different. And it's used in many different applications. Of course, we use it in real estate, but it's used in lots of different business transactions where two parties have certain intentions, and what they're trying to do is make sure that they're both on the same page. And that's what a letter of intent does. It's okay. Party A has a certain intention and party B has a certain intention. Let's put them together on a page and sign it and agree to it and just make sure that we both have the same intentions. And that's kind of the purpose of it. So this document can be used as a conversation starter. It can be used as a way to continue a conversation with maybe somebody that has shown interest in real estate investment or investing with you. So that's point number one. It's a way to continue or start a conversation. There's 4 main points I want to cover here. Point number 2, it also gives you an outline of what to talk about during that conversation. So let's say somebody says to you, what you're doing in real estate sounds really interesting. I want to learn more about it. And I have some money I'd like to invest. So maybe this works out for me, but I want to know more about what you're doing. Well, this letter of intent gives you an outline of what to talk about. So it makes your job a lot easier if you're trying to have these conversations. Point number 3 is it helps you get answers to questions that might be difficult to ask. So you don't want to come straight out, for example, and say to somebody, well, how much money do you have to invest? Or how many mortgages can you qualify for? But the way it's worded on this document, we kind of can get to the answers to those questions without straight out coming out and asking them. So it's useful to get answers to questions that are difficult to ask. And point number 4 is it actually kind of gets you start to think about details involved in a transaction before you might have even thought of them. So it gets you ahead of the game when it comes to actually completing a transaction. We're going to talk about all of these points as we go through the document. And one other tip I'm going to just mention, because I don't want to forget it, is that you don't want to wait for perfection when it comes to this. Like if you're filling it out and you don't quite have an answer yet, or you're not sure, well, don't just stop there and not fill out the rest of it. Fill out everything that you can figure out at this point, and you can start with that. You don't need to wait to have every answer perfect. And if some of the answers that you fill out on here with talking with a potential partner or somebody you're raising capital from end up changing, that's perfectly fine. Okay. And okay as well. Okay. So just remember all of those things as we go through this document. And I'm just going to check out the chat here. Is somebody having trouble with my video? So that's what Sean is saying. Hopefully everything is fine for everybody else. Yes, and Jules, it's a great foundation for a partnership. Absolutely. And that's really what this document is for. So we're going to share the screen here, guys, and we're going to just kind of jump in. I filled out a little bit of it. Well, I filled out this document already, but we're going to kind of go through it just so I don't waste the time here typing. And so we filled it out most of the way already. So let's go share my screen. Here we go, guys. Let's walk through the letter of intent. And before we do that, I just want to say this. If you don't have a copy of this, you want a PDF fillable copy, the exact same one that I'm showing here. Jules will throw it in the comments here. It's also in the description of this video. And you can download it for free. Okay. So just you fill out your name, your email address, and your phone number, and you have access to download this exact same document that we're going through tonight for free. Okay. So if you don't have it yet, go and do it right now. Download it. You'll have it in a matter of seconds, and you can follow along as we go through this if you want. Okay, so now you see it on the screen here. What are some important things to start off with? Well, obviously you want to date your document. You want to throw in here the name of the partner or potential person that you're working with, their address, because you might have several of these letters of intent. As you go through the process, you want to kind of be able to go back and say, oh, okay, for John Jones, I'm planning to do this. For Sally Smith, I'm planning to do that. And you can kind of differentiate the different intentions you might have with different partners, because not every partner is going to be the same or looking for the same type of property. Okay, so our first section here, guys, we're going to jump right into this is, oh, thank you, Jules, for throwing it in the chat. Yes, your free fillable copy. Just click that link, guys, and you can download it right away. Our first section is who's the relationship between. And so you'll notice here we have JV investor A and JV investor B. Now you might have investor C, D, E, and F. Most of the time you're going to likely have one, maybe two partners on a potential property. But you could fill out a different letter of intent with each of those partners if you want, or you can just add it into this document. Okay, so remember, this is just an outline of a typical letter of intent intended for real estate investment. Okay, so we're looking in this one to be creating a joint venture relationship. It's going to be between who? Now, this is where you start making some decisions, because is it going to be between you personally, or are you going to be using your company? And you want to make that decision. Hopefully start thinking about it. And remember, point number 4 is start thinking about details maybe you haven't thought about yet. And that's kind of what this is am I going to use a company, or am I going to use my personal name? And same thing with your JV investor. And you can help to guide them. Should they be using their company? Should they open a company, a corporation? Or would they use their personal name for this investment? And so this is a very start of the conversation. You're kind of starting to see some of the things you need to think about when these relationships are created. So obviously, as it says here, you're excited to be working together. You're optimistic, and it is saying straight out, guys, this is an outline, and I'm just going to highlight this right there. This is an outline of our agreement in principle until further paperwork is drafted. So it makes it very clear that this is not a legal document. This is not something that everyone is stuck to. This is just outlining our intentions at this point. So our first section here is property specifications. Okay, so what you're kind of doing here is nailing down what kind of property are we going to be looking for, and what kind of timelines are we looking for to find that property. So our first section here is property will be purchased within, and then we put in a time period. How many months from today? So let's say, what do we want to put in there? Well, we wouldn't want to put 2 weeks from today, because that's probably too soon if we're just starting our property search and we're just starting this conversation. And we wouldn't want to put 2 years in here because we don't want to delay this intention. There's an intention behind this partnership and we might as well get it started. So we usually suggest somewhere between 4, 6, 8 months, somewhere in that period, you're going to start looking for a property of this particular type that we're going to define here in this section. So I put 4 months in here just for the example. So price range. Well, this is a question that you're getting right off the bat too, and that's going to help you determine what kind of price range should we be looking at with a money partner. So if you're talking to somebody that's going to be supplying the down payment funds, this is kind of a way of saying, well, how much do you have to invest without having to say how much money do you have to invest? What price range of property? Because as investors, we have to put 20% down. So if we have to put 20% down and we're looking for a $500,000 property, we need to have $100,000 or more than $100,000 because of closing costs, but we have to have at least $100,000 available to buy that property. And we'll get into more detail about that as we go down this list. So you start talking about a price range. Well, the properties that we find cash flow are kind of in this price range, or properties that we find that are attracting really good tenants are in this price range. And is that something that you think would work for you? And this is kind of how we start to phrase these questions, guys. And leave it open for you don't want to go from 200,000 to 2 million because that's too broad. But 400,000, 500,000, somewhere in that range doesn't mean you can't look for something that's 6 or 3. But we're trying to nail this down a little bit. The more specific we can get, the more we look like an expert, the more you as a working partner, if you're using this from that point of view, looks like an expert. Now, what style of property? So I put in here 400 to 500,000. Now, what style of property are we going to be looking for? Well, here I put in a house with a suite just to give an example. That could be regular single family. That could be a townhouse or a condo. That could be a multifamily building. That could be a commercial property. It could be whatever you want it to be. For the example here, we're just putting in a house with a suite, which is fairly typical place to start for those of you that are just getting going. And then a few details about that house. Okay. What kind of square footage are we looking for? How many bedrooms do we want in that particular property? How many bathrooms would we be looking for? And then where is it located? And give yourself a couple of options. Now, this could be, this province or this province. That could be this city or that city. It could be this country or that country. You can nail it down to however you want, depending on what your partner is looking for. Again, the more specific you get, though, the more it almost is like there's more intention behind it. It's more real. If it's too broad, it might not seem realistic that you're going to find exactly what you're looking for. So, in this example, I said X province or Y province. So that could be Alberta or Ontario, or it could be BC or Nova Scotia. It could be whatever you want to put in there, Edmonton or Calgary or Toronto or Ottawa, whatever. You can start to give some options. It could be more than 2 options, obviously, as well. So you see that at this point, when we're done property or the section number 1, we've kind of started to nail down some of the specs for what type of property we're looking for. Now, that's good for both partners. That's good for you as the working partner looking for the property because now you have some direction. A certain price range. Where you're going to look. The type of house. This is information you can then pass on to your realtor. They can start searching for you, see what's available on the market now, and maybe keep some ongoing searches going. So you start getting some specifications that are not too specific, but specific enough. Now, the next section, number 2 here, is the estimated financial contribution. Very, very important section here. And it's kind of based on what we've talked about already in section number 1. We nailed down the price range, but how much are they looking to contribute? We need to make sure that our partner at this point knows that the contribution is more than just the down payment. So it could include, as this second point here mentions, it's dependent on purchase price. but it includes your closing costs, any initial repairs that might be needed to get the property up and running, put some tenants in it. It could be who knows what is included in closing costs, taxes that need to be paid, or whatever it might be. That amount is not just the down payment. So JV Partner B, we're making it clear here that, if we're buying a $500,000 property, we are going to need a contribution of approximately $120,000 to cover our closing costs, to cover some minor renovations, to cover whatever. And of course, they're not held to this number. Nobody's going to hold them to this number. This is just a guideline so that they understand it's more than the down payment. And it also does clarify here that what you as the working partner or JV partner A is responsible for, that you're the one that's going to do all the work. You're going to conduct and oversee all business related to the acquisition, the administration, the management, the final closing on the property. So your responsibility is working. Their responsibility is putting in the funds to buy the property. So again, this is clarifying how the relationship is going to work. Okay, guys? So far, any questions? I want to see it in the chat. If you have any questions about this, throw it in there and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. And if no questions, that's great. We'll just continue on this topic here. Okay. So let's go down. Our point number 3. Awesome. I'm glad you find it helpful, Michelle. That's great. Point number 3 is our property ownership. How are we going to break that down? So, vast majority of joint venture partnerships that Tiffany and I did were a 50-50 split. Now, we had some that were 66%, 34%. We had some that were 50, 30, 20, depending on what partners were bringing what to the scenario. You can change that however you want to change that. I would say the standard in the industry is 50-50. So that's what I put in here for an example. But again, you can, if this is your first time ever doing it and you're not fully confident, you might need help from the money partner to do some of the work. Well, maybe you give them a higher share of the percentage of ownership. And again, this is the more experience you get, the more of a professional you are in dealing with properties and partners and acquisitions and reporting and all of the stuff that you need to do. Well, maybe you take a higher share because you're more in demand and you're the one bringing the great properties now. So, these are things that you can play with as you continue on in your investing journey. I'm actually just going to take this title off the screen while I'm thinking about it. So just give me a second to take that off. Okay, there we go. Okay, so percentage ownership. And now we're going to break that down a little bit more, guys, as to where the money gets split in some of the sections coming up. But that's a good start to talk about the ownership percentages. Now, point number 4, targeted closing date on the property. Now, you might think, well, we already talked about that. Up here, we said property will be purchased hopefully within 4 months from today. And up here, we said today is April 11th, 2023. So that's pretty easy to figure out. But let's just make it even clearer. And that's what this whole point of this document is for, guys, is to clarify intentions. So if we ask the same question more than once, there's a reason for that, because we want to make sure the intentions are clear. We want to make sure that there's no questions in the back of their mind, because, a confused mind says no. A confused mind will turn away or shy away from investing. But if they have a clear picture as to what they're investing in, my goodness, that's going to make a big difference. So let's specify a date. Okay, guys, 4 months. It's April 11th right now. 4 months brings us to roughly August 11th. Let's make it August 15th. Let's put a date on it. We want to find this kind of property and we want to do it by August 15th. Okay, so we put a target closing date. Now, remember, if that's a closing date, what has to happen before that? Well, we have to have conditions removed probably at least 2, 3, 4 weeks before that, which means we probably even have to have an offer accepted maybe a month, month and a half, 2 months before that, which gives you roughly 2 months to maybe start finding a property now and get an accepted offer. So it's starting to put a little urgency in place if we want to close by August 15th. Okay, so that urgency is a good thing when it comes to closing partnerships. So our fifth question here, guys, is mortgage funding. Who's going to apply for and qualify for the mortgage? And again, this is something you want to decide ahead of time. Is it something that we are going to apply and qualify for jointly? Is it something that we are going to have partner B responsible for or partner A responsible for? So we can check off which one it would be. In this instance, because we have a money partner and a working partner in this scenario, and they're bringing the funds, they're going to qualify for the mortgage as well. That's what they're bringing to the table. That's why they're getting 50% ownership. And in this case, we're going to check point number 2 there. Okay. Now, Jules, I love it. That's awesome. Yes, swag, guys. She just put the link in if you want your Fearless gear. Again, a great conversation starter. People say, well, what is Fearless? You're a real estate investor? Oh, really? Well, tell me a little bit more. That's how these conversations start, guys. So the more seeds you can drop, seeds you can plant and hooks you can drop. We talk about that in our boot camp all the time, the better. So swag helps in that way. Title. How is the title going to be arranged? Who's going to be on title? Well, a lot of times, guys, and vast majority of the time, whoever qualifies for the mortgage is going to be the one that's on title. So what happens to the other person? How are your interests, my interests in this case, how are they secured? Well, the title is going to be held in my partner's name with a caveat on the title registered in my name. Okay, so I'm going to have the joint venture agreement registered on title. That's going to hold the property accountable. It can't be sold without that joint venture agreement being satisfied. And that's exactly what this is clarifying here in this letter of intent. And remember, I'm going to say this a million times, guys. This is not a joint venture agreement. That joint venture agreement specifies all of this stuff in far greater detail with more legal jargon in there. This is just an overall view of your intention. And if this is filled out accurately, guys, you can take this letter of intent and give it to your lawyer and say, here's our intention, draft us a joint venture agreement based on this. And that makes their job a lot easier. And for you Ignited members that have access in your toolbox to our joint venture agreements, you give them your joint venture agreement template and you give them your letter of intent filled out, and they can make it very, very simply. And you're not spending the big bucks on having a new one drafted. Okay, so length of hold. This is a big, big question. And, in most cases, I'm going to say that when you have an intention of bringing a partner on, a lot of times it's a long-term type of investment or a long-term partnership. So even if you're doing flips, even if you're buying and selling, doing more active income type of real estate investing, you might end up doing it once, then doing it again, doing it again, doing it again. And it's more of a long-term type of relationship. So if it isn't, you would obviously just cross this out, change it, whatever, and not state that it's a long-term investment, but most are. So it says here, both parties agree it's a long-term type of investment, and they agree to hold the property for a minimum of X number of years. So this is, again, another good conversation point with a potential partner is how long are we going to hold this property for? Do we want to buy it and sell it in a year? Do we want to buy it and hold on to it for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years? Because think of it this way, if your intention was a 3-year type of investment and their intention was they were expecting to get their money back in 6 months or a year, well, that could create some conflict down the road, right? So these are topics that you need to talk about with your potential partner is how long are we going to be in this together? How long are we going to be working together? How long are we going to own this property for? So we usually do a couple of things here. We put in a minimum. We want to have it as a minimum of, let's say, 3 years. Could be 5, could be 7, whatever. Or till the property is increased in value by, notice that, guys, or till the property is increased in value by X number of percent. So I put in 25% because that's what most of our joint venture agreements say is 25%. So what's the point of that? Well, perhaps you said a minimum of 3 years, but a year later, the property value has been driven up dramatically, and maybe it's starting to be a time to sell. Well, then now you might want to look at selling it based on the fact that it's gone up in value. You've made some money. Let's sell the property. So these again are questions that you want to start thinking about ahead of time. And then you can also determine how long you want, or when you definitely want to be out by. Okay, let's say a minimum of 3 years, or until the property has gone up 25%. And probably before 10 years is when we want to be out of this investment and have our money back. So now both of you are entering this agreement with a time frame in your head that makes sense for both of you. And of course, this is a discussion. It's not like you're going to tell them 3 years and 10 years and 25%. This is a discussion you have. You go in with a blank document, and what works for you, what works for both of you is a question you're going to have. Okay, so the length of term is important to discuss. And now we're going to get to some more money details when it comes to figuring this stuff out ahead of time. Now, you remember we talked about let's go back here, in point 3 about the share ownership of the property. So how much we each own. But I'm going to tell you something, is that you might both own 50%, but that doesn't mean that the proceeds of that property are split that way. It could mean something else. And I'll give you an example. Is one of our big joint venture partners that I think we had roughly around 20 properties with this particular partner. He did not want any cash flow. And so we ended up getting 100% of the cash flow, and he ended up getting 0. As far as the equity appreciation, he wanted 66% of that, and we got 34% of that. So it worked in both of our favor at the time. Tiff and I were, doing this as a business. The more cash flow we could get, the better. So the fact that we had more cash flow then, the better. And for him, he was more of a long-term, in the end, I want to take out bigger chunks. That's the equity appreciation. And so he wanted a bigger chunk of that. So this is where you can start to have these discussions, is even though we're 50-50 owners, how are we going to split our equity appreciation? Well, in this case, I put in 50-50 because that's what we did most of the time. Now, again, you can change that, and you have the option of changing it on here. And the fact that the option is there gives you something to talk about. That's kind of the point of this, remember. Point number 2 that we talked about at the very beginning. This gives you an outline of what things you need to talk about. And so how is that equity appreciation going to be split? Now, for those of you that are watching and you're wondering what is equity appreciation, that is where, let's say we bought this $500,000 property. Let's say it went up 25%. Let me do some quick math here. And it's now worth $625,000. That $125,000 is what we call equity appreciation. Okay. So how is that going to be split when we go to sell this property? Point number 9 is cash flow. Cash flow. So it's defined here as all property revenues less all property expenses. Again, very simple explanation. This is not in great detail, but it covers the whole gamut as to what cash flow really is. And then you can now say, well, it'll be collected according to the split in ownership. So 50-50. You can fill that out 50-50, or maybe it's different. Maybe in this case, they want more cash flow or you want more cash flow. You can figure that out. And then a question here is, how often is that cash flow going to be distributed? Because the rent comes in, the expenses are paid, you have some money left over. That starts to accumulate. Let's say you have $200 a month cash flow. Do you want to be writing a $100 check to each person every single month? Probably not. So maybe you want to let that accumulate, and once a year you write a check to each other. Some people just let it accumulate till the end of the investment and split it at the end, so that the reserve is significantly higher. However you want to distribute the cash flow is up to you. And again, a topic for conversation here on the letter of intent. Okay. Now, what happens upon sale or refinance? This is a really good question, guys. this is something that I think confuses a lot of people when it comes to a joint venture is how are the funds distributed? Well, notice it says here, upon sale or refinance, JV partner B will receive their initial financial contribution first, as outlined in point 2. So remember point 2, let's go back. That's their estimated financial contribution. So whatever it ends up being when you actually buy the property, that they will get back first if you refinance or if you sell the property. Then the remaining funds, which include but are not limited to the equity appreciation, the cash flow, the mortgage paydown, will be split according to the percentages agreed above. Okay, so that's a big point that you need to remember. Remember that property that you bought at $500,000. It went up to $625,000. Okay, it was $100,000 down. So your mortgage started at $400,000. It's now at $625,000. And there's what is that? $225,000 in between there. Okay. They put in $120,000 to begin with. So they would get their $120,000 back first. And then any extra gains, that's where these percentage splits come into play. Okay. So money partner gets their money back first, then the splits are made. All right. Clear as mud, everybody. Let me know in the chat. The chat's really, really quiet, guys. So I want to know that people are still there and this is making sense. If it doesn't make sense, let me know because I will clarify it. But that's so far where we're at. We're almost at the end. Clear as mud. Okay, awesome. Perfect. So, and by the way, we have a tutorial on this that will be uploaded to our site. So, and of course, this is on YouTube. So and in our Facebook group, so you guys can refer back to this when you need, and when you are at the point of actually having this conversation with people. Okay, so joint venture partners, you would sign this section. And then after that, we have another little section here that's important, guys, that we've added in to our letter of intent here. And that is just a confirmation about the initial deposit. Because here's the thing, when Tiff and I were doing it, and this might be the case for some of you as well, when we first got started, we didn't have $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 lying around to use as deposit money on our offers. Now, it doesn't happen in every province across the country. Some provinces, you don't need to make a deposit until you have an accepted offer. But in some cases, and certainly in Alberta, you would put your deposit with your offer. So you're kind of writing a check when you make an offer, whether they accept it or not. And so, if you don't have the funds, where's that coming from? Well, let's go back up to point number 2. Point number 2, guys, is that they're contributing. JV partner here is contributing the whole amount that's needed for this investment. That includes the closing costs, etc. So they're putting the money in, so they will supply the deposit. And that's kind of what this is saying here and making clear. And again, your intention is being made clear. Who's writing the checks here? And trust me, your money partners or your potential money partners are going to want to know this and be clear on this. So if we ignore these kind of conversations, then it creates distrust. But if we have these conversations up front, then our money partners or those that we're working with are going to be very, very clear on our intention, on what they need to actually follow through with. So you're asking here, return a signed copy to ourselves. And notice here, who is that check written to? Well, think of it this way. If I'm the working partner, okay, my company here, if I'm the working partner and I'm working with my realtor and we find a really good property, it happens to be $450,000. It's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It has a suite. It's 1,800 square feet. It fits all of our things that we say in our letter of intent here. And I need to write an offer. I want to write an offer because it's a great property. These don't come across our desk very often. Well, I need to have those funds available. And I need to write a check to the realtor who then passes it to the seller's realtor, and it's held in trust on this particular deal. So I need to have those funds available to me. So who holds this? In most cases, we suggest it should be you as the working partner. Now you might say, well, who's going to write me a check for $10,000? Well, somebody who's going to partner with you for 3 to 10 years should have the confidence that they can write this check to you. And as it says, it will only be used for the purposes described in this letter of intent. Okay, so this is again establishing and building how strong is this relationship? Do they trust? Are they going to come through when we need them to? If I go out and do the work and find a really good property, are they going to be there to follow through with this? Well, the fact that if they're willing to write a deposit check now and have me hold it on their behalf shows that they have the trust in order to do that. Well, now we're seeing that we have a strong relationship here that will likely go forward. Okay, so it's a touchy conversation sometimes, and sometimes this could be held by a lawyer. It could be held by the realtors brokerage that we're working with. It could be held by other areas if our partner is not 100% comfortable with just writing us a check. But if you're able to get those deposit monies to you, it enables you now to go out there and do your shopping. Hopefully that makes sense. Awesome. So you're making it very clear. How much are we looking for on a property like this? What kind of money are we looking for as far as a deposit? 10,000 would be normal. Who are we making the check payable to? Would be my company. I would fill out who your lawyer's contact information is so that they have an idea that you have a team set up already. You already have a lawyer in place. So you would put your lawyer's contact information, and you could actually add their lawyer's contact information to this as well. And you initial that page. So guys, that is our letter of intent, and that's the questions that we go through. So if you have any questions, throw it in the chat and I'll try to answer them. And if not, it's really a 3-page document. It's kind of like a 2-page document with a signing page with the deposit information on it. So, but it's very, very simple. It's not using a whole bunch of legal terms. And it should be easy for you to understand, easy for them to understand. That's a purpose of a letter of intent. And I'm just going to review our top 4 points, our 4 main points that why we use this document before we close off today. And then I'll get to your questions as well. So point number 1, remember that this document is a conversation starter and it's a way to continue a conversation. Okay, so somebody shows interest. Hey, why don't we have a look at a letter of intent, and let's go through this and see if we're on the same page. Point number 2, this gives you an outline of what things you need to talk about. Maybe you never really thought about the fact that it's not just the down payment money and you actually need closing costs. Maybe you never thought about the fact that who is going to be joint venturing, me or my company? Am I going to open a corporation? Are they going to do that? So some of these things that maybe you never thought about, you're going to go through and make sure that both have thought about it. Point number 3, it helps you get answers to questions that are difficult to ask. You notice by filling this out, you're going to have a clear view. Let's go back to this, guys. And I'm just going to go back to point number 3 here, where you talk about the initial contribution. When we've gone through this with partners in the past, we say, we kind of go through, okay, so if we're buying $500,000, it's a $100,000 deposit, we need some closing costs, but roughly, let's say $110,000 to $120,000. Are you comfortable with that? Does that work for you? We've had some JV partners or prospective JV partners say, well, that's a little higher than I have available right now. And we've had some JV partners say, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do 5 or 10 of those. And now you have an idea as to what availability this potential partner might have for money, how much interest they might have in investing with you, without having to come out and ask the difficult question of how much money do you have to invest? Okay. And point number 4, it helps you to start thinking about details that maybe you haven't thought of yet. So all good things, guys, that we need to keep in mind when it comes to starting relationships, continuing relationships, moving them along. And I know that some of you might have had conversations with people that were interested, and maybe it hasn't gone anywhere. Maybe it kind of dropped off. The conversation ended. You didn't know what to do next or what to say next. Well, you can use this document to kind of revive or get that conversation going again. That's what its purpose is. And so hopefully you guys can use it well. You can raise a lot of money being clear in your intentions. and making sure that your partners are clear. And that's what makes really, really good partners, guys, is when everybody knows exactly what is expected of them and everybody knows what the intentions of that relationship are going to be. So if you haven't done it yet, download this document, get yourself familiar with it, fill it out once or twice with a friend, a family member. Get used to asking the questions and talking about them. Practice. For you Ignited members, practice talking with one another about this. Fill it out with one another. And that will certainly help your conversation go a lot smoother. Okay, guys, so that's our training for this week. Thank you for joining us, and put this to good use. And if you don't have it yet, I'm sure Jules will throw it in the chat once more, where you can download this for absolutely free. Just go to investorlife.com and click in the toolkit, and you can click on Letter of Intent. All right, guys, have a great night. And our Ignited members, we will see you over in our laser session here at the top of the hour. And so, yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And we have some really cool topics to talk about tonight. So we'll see you guys. Take care. See you next week.